Hello, everyone. Welcome. Just letting everybody get signed in. Hope you're all well today. Join us. Okay, welcome. This is our monthly Ask the Chairman Anything with Ken Abramowitz. My name is Marcia Steinberg, and I will be moderating today. Today, our topic is key challenges facing the U.S. in the Ukraine. And as you presentation should take about 15 to 20 minutes. Then we're going to go into audience Q&A. And we encourage you, please bring your questions. That's what this is all about. We want to know what you want to hear. And we'll go as long as you have questions or until 5 o'clock. Just a little housekeeping, a little reminder here for anybody that's new to this format or has some questions, to enter your questions if you're on an iPad. There's a question mark in the upper right-hand corner. Just click on that and there'll be a box to enter your question. If you're on a computer or a laptop, there's an arrow at the top in the right-hand corner, and click on that. You'll see a list. One of the items is questions. Click on that and you can enter your questions there. All right, on to our upcoming events. Our next Ask the Chairman is 1 month from today, March 10th, same time, 4 p.m. Eastern Time. And again, we have our in-person seminars. Our next one coming up is March 6th. That's with Frank Gaffney. He's the founder of the Center for Security Policy. Now, if you're anywhere near Boca Raton, we would love to have you join us. Please come meet us, come see us live. We'd love to have you there. And to start things off, we're going to have a poll. Let's see. Here we go. We are going to have a poll. Do you think that Putin will invade the Ukraine within the next 2 months? Maybe. We're collecting responses. Most of you have chimed in already. We're waiting for an answer. It's neck and neck with yes and no. Yes is 42%, no is 42%, and we have 17% maybes. Okay, so we'll move on to the next. Okay, we have one more poll. If he does invade Ukraine, should NATO provide Air Force support? Yes, no, or maybe. Okay, everybody's chiming in here. Anyone else? All right, we have 69% with yes, 15% no, and 15% maybe. And that's where we go from there. Next, I'll open it up to Ken. Welcome, Ken. You're on.
Well, welcome everybody. It's good to virtually see everybody. So we're going to have some fun today. Thank you for your help and with the questions and with the organization. And I look forward to seeing everybody who can make it on March 6th. With Frank Gaffney, we'll be discussing China and their threat to Taiwan and their threat to America. But today, we're going to discuss Ukraine. So and I'll speak for about 15 minutes and then answer your questions. Now, relative to Ukraine, there was a very important treaty of sorts in 1994 called the Budapest Memorandum, and it was signed by Russia, Ukraine, UK, and the US. And everyone accepted the sovereignty of Ukraine as a country and its borders. And in return, the Ukraine shipped back to Russia 5,000 nuclear weapons, which were finally returned by 1997. So this was an agreement. The US and the UK are signatories. Now, it reminds me a little bit about Hong Kong. When the UK returned Hong Kong to Chinese sovereignty, they signed a 50-year contract that China would allow of Hong Kong. And the UK and the US were signatories. China broke it after 25 years, and the UK and US said almost nothing. Well, here we are again. Another international agreement signed by the great powers of the US and the UK. And President Putin violated the contract. In 2014, he invaded Crimea, which was the eastern border of Ukraine. And then 6 months later, invaded eastern Ukraine itself, an area called the Donbass region, which is 7% of Ukraine. So he violated that agreement twice. And the US and the UK, as signatories, basically did nothing other than some sanctions, and once again disgraced themselves. And it goes to a point, which is that democracies can't be trusted, because democracies change power every 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, depends on the country. And during that period of time, a new group of people come in. They don't remember what the old people agreed to, and they don't feel legally obliged to honor it. Now, another example, that's Afghanistan. We were in Afghanistan protecting, theoretically, the security of the normal people from the Taliban criminal organization, terrorist Islamist organization, which attacked us through their support of Al-Qaeda, attacked us on 9/11 and killed almost 3,000 Americans. And then we just leave, so to speak, and don't honor our, and it was not a direct treaty, but we did not honor our moral obligations to protect the 40 million citizens from the Taliban Islamist criminal organization. And so that's just another example of democracies going back on their word. And so at this point, particularly after Afghanistan, America has very little credibility left in the world. The allies don't trust us, and the enemies don't fear us. And it's the same national security team running national security. No one was fired. And it's the same military who botched the withdrawal, and no one was fired there. Adding to the problem is the politicians have imposed a vaccine mandate on the military, and the military is going to lose 10 or 15% of its soldiers, and soldiers aren't so easily replaceable. You don't go to Walmart and say, I'd like to order 10,000 soldiers, please. You have to recruit soldiers. You have to train soldiers. It takes a year or two process to get soldiers in place and ready to fight. So we're degrading our military capabilities. Our military leaders are intellectually corrupt and have become racist and are imposing racist critical race theory on top of the soldiers, instead of preparing them to fight wars. So my first conclusion is that the U.S., even if it wanted to fight a war with Russia, is not capable of fighting a war. The military has been degraded in the past year so much that we cannot fight a war, we cannot win a war, and we're actually at existential risk if the bad guys understood how incapable our military is. The only thing the military can do is pretend, as they're doing through NATO. They're moving, different announcements have made, but roughly 10,000 soldiers into Eastern Europe, which are NATO countries. They haven't moved any soldiers into Ukraine. Ukraine is not a NATO country. So NATO does not have a legal obligation to protect Ukraine, but NATO countries are shipping military weapons into the Ukraine. The Ukraine's people are tough, and they're prepared to fight. And the countries, it looks like they're very unified in their hatred of Russia. And so Russia has consolidated through its bullying techniques, has consolidated the Ukraine people together, has consolidated NATO together, and which I'm sure Russia didn't intend to do, but it's a consequence of their bullying behavior against Ukraine. Now, let me add a few other little thoughts. Let me just put something on my screen so I can read it better. So in terms of warfare, I monitor 6 forms of warfare. Physical war, which is what we usually discuss in the newspapers or internet. But there's also cultural war, where you fight with words. There's economic war, you fight with dollars. There's legal war, also known as lawfare. There's demographic war, when you move people around. And there's cyber war. So conclusion number 1 is continuing of what I said about military. We cannot use military means. We're not capable anymore. We have no political will anymore. I hate to say this, we have no bipartisan will anymore. Neither the Democrats nor the Republicans, but for different reasons. Neither party wants to send American soldiers anywhere, let alone Ukraine. And so military war, physical war is out. So therefore, the U.S. government can only use the other 5 forms of warfare. Now, legal warfare and demographic warfare are not really applicable here. And in terms of cultural warfare, we're not very good at public relations and bluster and threats. So the only 2 mechanisms we have to stop Russia are economic and cyber. Now, Russians are very good at cyber. And if we attack them through cyber, they'll attack us through cyber. And if we attack their military, they'll attack our civilians. They could shut down airports. They could shut down the electric. Americans freeze. So cyber is not a good weapon to use. So that leaves economics. Now, we do have some good economic levers to pull. We could impose sanctions on Russia as a country, Russian businesses, particularly military businesses, and Russian individuals who own Russian businesses supporting weapons to the Putin government. We can obviously close down the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which is not operational, but it's almost operational. And that Germany is a proponent of that, but will make them something like 60% dependent on Russia for natural gas and easily blackmailed. So Germany's like a weak link in NATO right now. And we can use the SWIFT system and forbid Russia from using US dollars. Since US dollars are the reserve currency, that would be a problem, obviously, for Russia. We could also have tariffs. We could have export and import controls over products going into Russia or coming out of Russia. So economic warfare is really the only mechanism we have now to stop Russia, or to make it so painful to Russia that they wouldn't want to do this. But the administration hasn't laid this all out. So I would say it should right now lay out all the 10 things or 4 things, whatever it is, that America will do if Russia invades. So to make it crystal clear, so that Russia, President Putin can make the trade-offs properly, so to speak, and not invade. And so in other words, we have to get a lot tougher than we are now, particularly since the administration has no credibility as a result of Afghanistan. So if it wants to intimidate Putin, it has to do a lot better job now than it has heretofore. Let me just conclude with 3 thoughts. Number 1, we have to fix our energy independence. In the past year, we've lost roughly 2 million equivalent barrels of oil out of the roughly 12 million that we were producing. We have to get that 2 million back, and we have to become energy independent again, because a lot of this is a fight over energy. Germany has decommissioned many of its nuclear power plants and is down to 13% of its energy from nuclear. We have to encourage or cajole or force them to go to 50%, which is what France is. And as you know, it takes years to build nuclear power plants. And so they have to start now, and we have to encourage them and pressure them to do that. We can't allow the world's, Europe's economic engine, Germany, to be held hostage to the Russians. It just doesn't work. And number 2, we can't really complain about the integrity of the Ukraine borders, even though we're obligated to protect them, according to that Budapest Memorandum Treaty. But we can't really say very much. Well, we have an open southern border. Right now, America is undergoing a full-scale invasion by 120 countries, approximately 2.5 million people, illegals per year. Over the next 3 years, that'll be 10 million. I'll guess that 10% of them are criminals, terrorists, drug dealers. So we're going to be invaded by about 1 million criminals over the next 3 years. So it's very hard for us to fight for the integrity of Ukraine when we don't fight for the integrity of America. So that's like a contradiction of massive proportions. A third point to think about, and I'll stop in about a minute or 2. A third point to think about is if we don't rise to the occasion, and when I say we, I'm talking about America, I'm talking about NATO. If we don't rise to the occasion and intimidate Putin from invading Ukraine, the response will be devastating. Taiwan will be in a panic, afraid that America won't defend Taiwan should China invade after the Olympics. Israel will be in a panic that Iran will develop nukes and ICBMs, and America won't come to Israel's protection, or America won't even allow Israel to defend itself by itself. And so the world will be, I would say, is 3 months away from being totally destabilized if the Russians get away with taking over half of or all of the Ukraine. The world order will be in a mess, and we'll see wars all over the place. So this is just not a Ukraine issue. This is a democracy versus dictatorship issue. This is survival of Western civilization This is a far bigger issue than just Ukraine. And in the journey now, and we'll obviously see what happens in the next 3 months. So I think I will stop here and see what questions people have about the Ukraine and related matters.
Okay, I think you touched on this one, but we'll jump in with this. What is America's strategic interest in the Ukraine?
Well, first, I have a theory that when you're dealing with bad guys, and there's basically 3 bad guys today, according to my thinking, reds, greens, and blues. Reds are the communist or authoritarian governments like Russia, China, North Korea. Greens are the Islamist countries, also authoritarian dictatorships like Iran, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Turkey, Qatar. And we have the greens, the blues, who are the globalists, which is the United Nations and global corporations like Facebook, Twitter, and others. So the way I look at it is we have to confront every enemy simultaneously. So I'll give you an example. We have this slide in front of us. I'm only going to show one slide today. This is America's fighting a 10-front war for its existence. And you can see the various fronts. We'll discuss them other times, but I wanted to focus on number 3. NATO's underfunded. The NATO countries are supposed to devote 2% of GDP to national defense. Germany devotes about 1.5%. It basically won't protect itself, and it won't protect Europe. And that's why Trump used to criticize the Europeans for not protecting themselves. But the bigger point I'm getting to is that when you're fighting a 10-front war, I mean, I tried to make it simpler by having a 3-front war, namely the reds, the greens, and the blues. But in this example, it's a 10-front war. Every single front is important. You have to win on every single front. As soon as you lose on one front, it negatively affects the next front, the next front, and the next front. So, for example, we have this pretty map of America with our 50 states. What if one of the reds, greens, or blues said, the state of Maine, it's really mine. It's always been mine. You stole it from me, and I want it back. And if you give me the state of Maine, I'll be happy. I don't want the other 49 states. Just give me the state of Maine. Otherwise, I'm going to blow up everyone in America. So, we have a debate. And needless to say, half the country will say, well, we have 50 states. If we have 49, that's fine too. I mean, we don't have to have 50 states. So let's give them Maine. Then we don't have to fight a war with the bad guys. And we can live in peace. Well, okay. But once you say that the state of Maine is negotiable, how about New Hampshire? Are we going to go to war over New Hampshire? Or how about Vermont? So the point I'm getting, by the way, if you look at it in terms of your body, what if you said to me, oh, my fingers hurt? I should see a doctor. I go, what? Well, you don't need your fingers. I mean, it's only 2 fingers that hurt. And you have your other 8 fingers, and you have your toes and the rest of your body. Don't worry about it. You're going to say, well, they're my 2 fingers. They matter to me. So the point is, when you're fighting bad guys, you can't give any concessions anywhere. In any country, anywhere in the world, you cannot let the reds, the greens, and the blues bully you around. If you do, they'll just keep bullying you, and you might as well make your final stand here. So NATO in the U.S. should make its final stand against Russia right now in the Ukraine, wherever the Ukraine is. Someone can say, go back to it's like Maine. I say, yes, we will go to war to protect Maine. Even though there's only 1 million people there and it's cold, I don't care. We go to war to protect Maine. And I think we should protect Ukraine. I personally would use military means, particularly the Air Force, And if the Russians invade, I would be blowing them up as fast as they invade. And but politically, it's hard to explain that to the people. As I said before, both the Democrats and Republicans have miseducated the population about the nature of war. And that's one of the reasons why Citizens for National Security exists. And that's one of the reasons I do what I do as an individual is, but collectively, CFNS, we try to educate the American population as to the huge national security challenges. And in this case, both the Democrats and Republicans don't know what they're doing. So right now we have the Democrats, so we have to explain to them what they don't understand. And before we had Trump, who didn't understand endless war. But what we're in right now is what I call World War III. The Reds, the Greens, and the Blues have declared war on us. This is a war that's been going on for a long, long, long time. The Reds declared war on us 200 years ago when Karl Marx wrote the economic fiction book called Das Kapital. The Greens declared war on us 1,400 years ago when Muhammad and his successors announced that everybody will become Muslim or we're going to kill them. They took over about a third of the world, by the way. And the Blues have been declared war on us for about 100 years, since the League of Nations in the 20s, or you could say since the UN in 1946. And the EU, which is a global organization, regional organization with some global impact, in effect declared war on America about 30 years ago as they formed a united front against Russia, but also against America. So these endless wars are going to go on and on and on and on until we win or until we lose. So my feeling is, let's win and let's make our final stand right now. And that's why I don't think we should be in a compromising mood when you're dealing with, to quote one of my favorite movies, Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz, we're fighting lions, tigers, and bears. And when you're fighting lions, tigers, and bears, you have to fight lions, tigers, and bears. You don't throw them, you don't sacrifice Dorothy or one of her three friends. No, you fight as a united front and you win. So they won in that movie. Now we have to win in real life. What else do we have, Marcia?
All right. It's so nice to see some new names and new people on the webinar here. Thank you for joining us. I have a question. It's a little bit long, so bear with me. Irrespective of U.S. allied capacity, please comment on the historical need of Russia regarding warm water ports. Is there a potential room for negotiation or diplomacy regarding warm water access, as well as Russia's innate fear of encirclement going back centuries? He goes on and says, as a retired naval officer, I've always looked at and taught a professor of NSP that power is summation of resources, education, and training, multiplied by the sum of strategy and will. My concern is there is no strategy, think the presidential doctrine, nor will of the people leading the U.S. with very weak perceived or real power. Please comment.
Yes, I agree. But it's worse. We had no strategy under Trump. I hate to say that. And we have no strategy under Biden. Now, to some extent, if you wanted to be extra critical of Biden, you could say we do have a strategy, and the strategy is to lose. Basically, everything that's gone on for the past year has was good for the Reds, Greens, and Blues. I couldn't detect any policy moves that were good for America in the past 12 months. Now, Trump made some good moves, but he didn't have a strategy either. And I happened to meet a friend of mine who worked in the Pentagon in what's called the Office of Net Assessment. And this was a small group of internal consultants within the Pentagon. And they would create reports for the generals, for the politicians, about the relative strength of America versus its various adversaries. And then look at the net assessment. What that means is that one country can be stronger, let's just say, with missiles, and another can be stronger with anti-missiles, and one can be stronger with airplanes, and one can be stronger with aircraft carriers. But what they tried to do is put it all together and create an understanding for our leaders as to how we stood relative to our competitors, so we could make allocation decisions of, like, let's strengthen this, put more money here, hire more soldiers, more special operations, whatever the issue is. And he said that there was so much politics in that office that the office wasn't capable of actually doing its job. It wasn't, everyone was fighting each other, and they, not physically, but intellectually fighting each other. And they couldn't come up with coherent reports about how we should defend ourselves versus our competitors. And there was a bias throughout the bureaucracy that we don't even want to have a strategy. I'm talking about we, the bureaucrats. We don't want to have a strategy because we're afraid that the politicians, whichever flavor of politicians, would get us into war implementing a strategy. So not only do we have no strategy, but we have a bureaucracy determined to make sure that there's no strategy. That's pretty sick, I must say. Now, meanwhile, the bad guys have strategies. If you had an interview with Putin, just pretend, and you say, President Putin, do you have a strategy to, like, take over the world, or recreate the Soviet Union, which you're so dismayed broke apart? He'd say, of course I have a strategy. I'm not going to tell you, but yes, I work on the strategy every day. You morons have no strategy. And so my strategy is to take advantage of my strengths and take advantages of your. Now, if you interviewed President Xi of China or the supreme leader of the Iran criminal organization, pretending to be the government of Iran, they would say the same thing. Yeah, I have a strategy to take over the world. I'm not telling you morons what it is, but you'll just watch me do what I do. And so the point I'm getting to is the Reds, the Greens, and the Blues have a strategy to take over the world. We, the normal people, I color code as yellow for the sunshine or the sunlight of Western civilization. We, the yellows, we have no strategy to save ourselves. So one of the missions, it's a big mission, one of the functions and missions of CFNS is to create these strategies and talk to the senators, congressmen, and the administrations over time, and encourage them to, like, create a strategy. By the way, I come from the corporate world, in particular healthcare. If you interviewed the president of Johnson & Johnson or any of the great healthcare companies that say, Mr. President Johnson & Johnson, do you have a strategy? He goes, of course I have a strategy. What kind of stupid question is that? Every corporation has a strategy. We have strategies to grow, to innovate, to buy other companies. I've never heard of a question so stupid. So in the corporate world, everyone has a strategy. In the dictatorship world, everyone has a strategy. But in the democratic world, we have no strategy, because democracy after democracy is fighting itself. They call it the left and the right, whatever terms you want to use. Every single country is fighting itself, not physically fighting itself, but intellectually fighting itself. And as a result, neutralizes its ability to move forward. I mean, in my younger days, I used to have a tug of war. So can you imagine having a tug of war as a young 10-year-old, and on your team, let's just say you had 10 people on your team, half of them were pulling and half of them were pushing. You're going to lose every tug of war forever. And so it goes to actually one of the big questions I spend a lot of time thinking about it. Is there any future for democracy? Will every democracy basically defeat itself, so to speak, with its own internal dissension? And so that authoritarian governments, which right now are about 50% of the world population, will take over us, the other 50% of the world population, and we'll just have dictatorships everywhere. They won't be called dictatorships. You'll have nice names for them. One party rule. I mean, look at California. We don't call them dictatorships, but there's one party rule in California and New York. And so we have elements of that already within our country. And so democracies better get their act together, or we're going to find out that everyone in the world is going to live in some form of an authoritarian government. What else? So let me go back to the other issue of, doesn't Putin have some legitimate fears? Well, he has some. First, he knows that democracies are paper tigers. He knows that NATO is a defensive organization. He knows NATO's not going to attack Russia under any precedent ever. Democracies don't attack people until they're attacked, like Pearl Harbor. So, but he's publicly said that he wants to get the Russian speakers back into Russia. Now, he has an ulterior motive. Russia is 20% Muslim. And with the differential growth rates of Muslims versus Christians, in 2 generations, he could have 30 or 40% Muslim. So he's looking for Christians, Russian-speaking Christians, to come back home, so to speak. And so half of the Ukraine in the east, they are Russian speakers. So, and there's something like 30 million people in the Ukraine. So if he could get half of Russia, of Ukraine, he'd have, in round numbers, 15 million Russian speakers. If he took the whole thing, he'd have 30 million or so Russian speakers, and he wants more Russian speakers and to favorably aid the Christian-Muslim mix. So, but he's not threatened by the Ukraine, although he's publicly said, if it becomes part of NATO, you'll have missiles there, and the missiles can attack me in 5 minutes. I don't want missiles that can attack me in 5 minutes. If you're going to do that, I'll put missiles back into Cuba and Venezuela, and they'll attack you in 5 minutes. See how you feel about that. So he does have some legitimate issues there about the threat that we can pose with our missiles, such that he would have to make a 5-minute decision to go into a full-scale physical war. And in that sense, it's a legitimate fear on his part. But I'm sure there's some logical compromise such that we don't move missiles closer to Russia so that they have to make 5-minute life or death decisions on the future of their country. I don't think that's right for any leader to have to be in that type of a situation. We didn't tolerate it, by the way, in the JFK days when Russia moved some missiles into Cuba. And Kennedy would have said, they can attack me in 5 minutes. That's unacceptable. Well, it was unacceptable for us. I'm sure we could work out a compromise somehow with Putin. Putin is a type of person you actually can compromise. He negotiate only from the point of view of strength, but he's a very rational, very smart person, and he's can be reckoned with, but only if you're only if you're strong, because he's really strong. He'll just walk over you otherwise. What else do we have, Marcia?
All right, thank you everyone for your participation. Our next question is, why has Germany decreased the nuclear energy to 18%? That makes any sense?
Well, to further aid the question, why did they also work with Russia to create the Nord Stream 2 to take their natural gas percentage that they get from Russia from something like 30% to something like 60%? So that's the second dumb thing that they did. And the third dumb thing is they allowed 1.5 million unvetted Muslim fugitives, refugees, illegal migrants into the country, which is going to destabilize the demographics forever. Germany is something like 8% Muslim. In 2 generations, they'll be 30% Muslim. And in another 2 generations, the Muslims may well take over and there'll be no Christians in Germany. So why did Germany make these several existential mistakes? The nuclear power plant decommissioning, the Nord Stream 2, in the allowing the invasion of 1.5 million illegal Muslims. And now the chancellor was Merkel. So you'll have to come, it's like the same dilemma I have in the US. You have one of two conclusions when you see a mess like this. One is the leader was stupid, incompetent, and naive. That's if you want to be charitable. And if you don't want to be charitable, the Chancellor Merkel was a Russian agent. I never know the answer. Whenever I ask those questions to myself, I ask the questions about the Biden administration. Are they stupid and naive, or are they foreign agents? I pose those questions. I wish I could tell you I knew the answer, but there's elements of both. And but meanwhile, there was no criticism of Merkel. And one of the reasons there was no criticism, first, the press is not free anymore. But another reason is that there's huge amount of Russia disinformation. And the Russians are great at disinformation. And they're the leaders in disinformation. And it was created by the KGB. KGB has a new name now, but it's still the KGB. Putin came from the KGB. And the KGB had a very important concept called active measures, where they intervene in democracies with active measures, which is disinformation, and they try to destabilize the democracies from within. So when I see our democracy fighting each other, again, not with weapons, but fighting each other intellectually, I see Russian KGB fingerprints all over the place. When I see critical race theory, gender transition theory, these have Russian fingerprints all over the place. So the environmental groups that pressured Merkel to get rid of unsafe nuclear power have KGB fingerprints all over the place. And the KGB had an expression enunciated by some of their defectors that our goal is to get you to behave in our self-interest while you think you're behaving in your self-interest. So Merkel could be a victim of KGB disinformation, where she thought that by getting rid of nuclear power plants, she was making Germany safer. But she was just listening to KGB nonsense that purposely miseducated the population so that it would vote for green, what they call green politicians. Because Russia wanted Germany to be dependent on Russian oil and natural gas so that Russia could blackmail them. So yet German politicians would stand up and say, we're getting rid of nuclear power plants because they're dangerous to the environment. That was just KGB disinformation. Or they would say we're allowing 1.5 million refugees in because we're so kind and considerate and we care about human suffering. Well, yeah, they're going to have the German population when they get attacked, when the Christians get attacked, Muslims, and you have dead Christians all over the place. What about the human suffering of the Christians? They're going to get killed by all of these migrants coming in. Again, that would be Muslim Brotherhood disinformation coming from Turkey and Qatar. So the Reds, the Greens, and the Blues have great disinformation capabilities. The Blues, by the way, have the United Nations, and they have Davos, where they're trying to create a new world order of one country for everybody, which is just communist nonsense. All of our enemies are very good at confusing us. Such a good job at confusing us that we're really confused as a society. So whenever I see Republicans and Democrats cut their throat, figuratively, through words, I say to myself, are the KGB fingerprints all over this nonsense? Is it the Chinese KGB equivalent fingerprints? Is it the Muslim Brotherhood fingerprints, the global fingerprints? So we're losing control over our culture because we're allowing our enemies to fight a cultural war against us, and we don't know how to fight back. I know how to fight back, but we as a society don't know how to fight back.
Can we have a couple more questions here? How can the U.S. be so weak militarily? I would think that we have military means that are far superior.
In the past year, our military's gone downhill so fast that they could be in the Olympics, in some sledding competition of the Olympics, how fast they've gone downhill. So our military budget's flat. China's growing its military, I don't know, 10% a year. In Russia, let's just say 5% a year, and our military is growing 0. So that's from the Biden administration. Vaccine mandates are going to cause us to lose 10, 15% of our soldiers. Why would you do that? We're going to lose 10, 15% of our policemen. Why would you want to do that? And then teaching critical race theory, which is pure communist KGB nonsense. We're teaching that to our soldiers. That's a useful effort for them, instead of running and jumping and shooting and training for a war. We're teaching them communist nonsense. General Milley, who said that the #1 problem facing the military is white rage. No one's been able to identify white rage, and so he's going down an Alice in Wonderland rabbit hole, looking for white rage when it's a non-existent enemy. And also 3- and 4-star generals have to get political approval. So the socialists and communists in our government are only bringing in generals or promoting generals who are communist, socialists, racist people. So the army's been degraded tremendously. Afghanistan was an embarrassment, not just for America, but for the military. Can you imagine some politician says, pretend you're a general, okay? You're in charge of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and some politician says, we want to leave Afghanistan. We have an arbitrary deadline in like 3 weeks. And why don't you take your soldiers out first before we remove the civilians? You're going to say, oh, I'm a general and I follow orders. And if that's what you want me to do, sure, I'll remove the military first, and I'll leave the Americans and the Afghan friends as hostages. If that's what you want, sure. Yeah, because you're the political leader and I'm just a general, and we believe in political control over our military. So our military, Billy, agreed to withdraw military soldiers first, and agreed to leave $85 billion of weapons as a gift to the Taliban, and then leave our civilians as hostages. Now, what kind of a general would do that? Well, what they said to him, they said, you either do this stupid thing or you're fired like in 3 seconds. And Milley said, look, I spent 40 years becoming a general. I'm a head of Joint Chiefs of Staff. I'll give up all my morality and I'll follow your stupid orders. That's why he wasn't fired for Afghanistan, because he did what he was told to do. And that's why the State Department morons were not fired, because they did what they were supposed to do. So the country's in existential risk. The #1 risk actually facing the country is the U.S. government. I hate to say that, and because the U.S. government is out of control, and we're suffering as a result. And the people of Ukraine are a manifestation of that suffering, as they are now expendable. There was a famous movie in World War II, one of my big favorite movies, a John Wayne movie. I think it was 1946. It was in the Asian front, and it was called They Were Expendable. And it's about soldiers who couldn't be protected after we put them in harm's way. Well, the Ukraine is in harm's way, and the American society said they were expendable. But if they're expendable, it's back to my story about Maine. If Maine is expendable, how about Vermont and New Hampshire? And it goes on and on and on until you have no country left or no Europe left. So that's why we should make our final stand right here with the Ukraine against the reemergence of the Soviet Union.
Yes, on that same note, if Putin did take over the Ukraine, do you think he would want to then try to take over the rest of Eastern Europe or all of continental Europe and continue moving?
Well, To make it simple, there's two ways to take over a country. One is to physically take over a country, obviously. That's the hard way. The other way to do it is just to intimidate a country. I mean, just think of your own home, okay? Pretend I was a bad guy, and I say to you, I want to take over your home and throw you out. You're now scared because I'm a lunatic, I'm a bad guy, and the other way to do it is say, I'm capable of taking over your home. I'm capable of throwing you out of your home, but I'm not going to do it. By the way, would you mind paying me $10,000 a month to help me? I have a lot of expenses right now. And if you give me $10,000 a month forever, I won't come into your house, take everybody out, throw you out, and take over your home. That's called extortion, intimidation, blackmail. It's highly illegal, so to speak, just as illegal as throwing you out of your home. But if in the absence of a police force, you'll pay me the money through extortion. So the point I'm getting to is he can take over the Ukraine physically, which is a mess, but he also can take it over through intimidation. By saying, if you don't do this, I'm going to do that. If you don't do this, and so just with constant blackmail, extortion, intimidation, he can, in effect, take over. There's a term in Europe they use for this. This is what Russia did to Finland. So it's called the Finlandization, so to speak, of a country where you don't actually take it over, but you just tell them, here's the 10 things you have to do. Here's the 10 things you can't do. And if you listen to me and do what I tell you to do, I'm not taking over your country. So that would be, it's probably plan A for Putin, is just to intimidate Ukraine and other such countries. And plan B would be to actually physically send soldiers in, fight a war, have economic sanctions, lose the Nord Stream 2, lose the US dollars through trade of the SWIFT, what's called the SWIFT system. I would think that that's plan 2. Plan A is just extortion. By the way, same story with the Iranians. They're developing nukes and ICBMs. They promised to kill everyone in America. They promised to kill everyone in Israel. But they don't want to kill everyone in America, everyone in Israel. They just want to extort money from us, so to speak, just in that joke that I gave you about your home and intimidating you into paying me to not invade your home and throw you out. What else do we have?
Okay. With the describing what appears to be the domino theory, like the one that got us into Vietnam, what are the similarities and differences now?
That's a very good question. Yes, in that time, we were worried about dominoes, and that was a legitimate worry. And because of that, we did get into Vietnam, and we lost 50,000 or so soldiers, and we ended up retreating. It was another Afghanistan disaster. And we abandoned the people of Vietnam, just like we abandoned the Afghan people. The difference is that communism at that time was a paper tiger. We didn't know it at the time. I'm talking we as a country or society didn't know it. But behind the crust, so to speak, there was no bread there. And so we fought, we left, but you can see it had no implications other than the people of Vietnam had to live under communist rule, which at least they didn't kill a gazillion people. And now they have a somewhat normal country, assuming you want to live under an authoritarian government. So it ended up not being a domino disaster to lose in Vietnam. But now Russia has its act together better than it did before. They're tougher and we're weaker. China's much tougher and we're weaker. Iran pretends to be tough and we're weak. So I can see many more dominoes now. At that time, we were in the 9th inning of fighting communism. Communism morphed itself. And the irony is we're now fighting communism in our school systems. We're not fighting people with uniforms that are red, so to speak, with guns and bullets. we're fighting communism as a cultural warfare right now. So you could argue that the dominoes did fall, but they fell in a different, in a non-physical way, and they morphed into cultural warfare. And the Russians are very good at cultural warfare, and they basically took over our schools and are teaching our kids nonsense until we throw out school board after school board. What else, Marcia?
We are almost out of time, but I'll give you one more question. What if Putin only wants to make sure that Ukraine doesn't join NATO and is waiting for assurances from America?
Well, that's one of his several demands, but it's bigger than that. He wants no new countries in the NATO, and he wants NATO out of the countries that it's in the former Eastern Europe, which were colonies of the Soviet Union. So he's had a number of demands that even the wimps running NATO in the US can't even agree to. But if America and NATO mounted a serious counterattack, and I mean primarily economic, because as they said, we don't have a military anymore that is capable of fighting anymore. So if the administration said, if you enter the Ukraine, here are the following 8 things that are going to happen to you. Okay, and we're going to publish it right now so that you know, so there's no ambiguity. Number 1, you can kiss the $8 billion Nord Stream 2 pipeline goodbye. Number 2, you can kiss using dollars goodbye and try selling your oil in rubles to someone else. We are going to have economic sanctions against not only the government and not only businesses, but also individuals like President Putin. And if you expect to spend some of the $48 billion that you've stolen over the past 20 years, you can forget about that too. And we're going to become energy independent and stop this war on this nonsense KGB war on fossil fuels. We're going to encourage Germany to become energy independent so they don't have to buy your unreliable natural gas, President Putin. And we're moving 100 airplanes into the area. And if we see any tanks, your tanks in the Ukraine, our airplanes are going to blow them up. Have a nice day. If we said that, he's not going into the Ukraine, but he'll go to what I call Plan A, which is just intimidate the Ukraine and other Eastern European countries. So they go through what I said before, the Finlandization process, and basically become neutralized or neuters, so to speak. And therefore, no threat to him, but he can allow his corporations to put their corrupt fingers into their economies and basically move his criminal organization into Eastern Europe, which and we'll half lose the countries, but over time we'll lose those countries from the world of democracy. I think one of America's job is to protect democracy worldwide. Now, I can't find any politician on either the Democrat or Republican side who thinks their job is to protect democracy worldwide. But I'm just saying that's what it should be. So I guess we're out of time. So I want to.
We're out of time. It's 5 o'clock.
So thanks everybody for listening. Thanks Marcia for so ably handling the webinar. And I look forward to seeing everybody on March 6th for Frank Gaffney. And and keep reading our website. Keep teaching yourself. And if you ever need some pointers from me of things to read that will help you understand the mess that's confronting all of us, I'm always happy to help anytime. So we'll sign off now. Goodbye and thanks to everybody.
Thank you everyone for all the new people, we really appreciate you. Looking forward to seeing you 1 month from today, March 10th. We'll have another webinar. Bye-bye.